In the cold expanse of space, among the hundreds of worlds that had long since risen above humanity's comprehension, Earth was little more than a distant memory. To the galactic soldiers, Earth was a relic, a planet that had once teetered on the edge of oblivion but had somehow managed to survive. They mocked the human species for clinging to outdated methods, especially their obsession with a now-ancient figure, the American sniper. To the aliens, the notion of a single soldier altering the fate of a battle was laughable. It was a thought born of primitive times, when weapons had yet to evolve into the sleek, all-powerful tools of their superior civilizations. Humanity's reputation among the stars had been shaped by decades of brutal war and technological struggle, but nothing had quite prepared the galactic forces for what they would encounter on the front lines. The humans they faced were no longer the disorganized, primitive fighters the aliens had read about in history texts. These were survivors, bound by an unyielding will to defend their home, a quality the aliens underestimated at their peril. The leader of the Galactic Battalion, Claren, a towering figure with a body of shifting chrome and organic alloy, leaned back in his command chair, his three ocular sensors scanning the human forces below. His species had conquered worlds with effortless precision, obliterating the resistance of lesser species with advanced technology and superior tactics. In his mind, Earth was nothing more than a nuisance. Its defenses were archaic, the humans foolish in their reliance on old-fashioned weapons and strategies. The stories of their soldiers, like the fabled American sniper, had become the subject of jest among his officers. Do they truly believe their sniper can stand against us? Claren asked, his voice a deep hum, resonating in the chamber. His lieutenant, a sleek insectoid named Threx, clicked her mandibles in amusement. Their faith in these relics of the past is endearing. Threx replied with a sardonic hiss. But the data is clear. The humans are no match for our firepower. Their reliance on long-range precision is laughable. Claren's mandibles twitched, his metallic fingers drumming on the armrest. These earthlings, they believe they are exceptional, but they are not. I have read the reports. One man, one sniper, turning the tide of an entire battle. Preposterous. Threx nodded, her eyes narrowing as she studied the data from the recent skirmishes. Despite the confidence in their technology, there was a persistent anomaly in the human defense. A single soldier, hidden in the ruins of their crumbling cities, had been taking down alien commanders with unnerving precision. They'd chalked it up to coincidence at first, but the more they encountered this sniper, the more it became clear that something was at play, something the galactic forces had not accounted for. "We will destroy them, Commander," Threx said, a sinister confidence in her tone. "This sniper, this hero, is nothing more than a myth they cling to. When the final assault begins, they will fall just like the rest." Claren's metallic lips curled into a smile, revealing razor-sharp teeth. "Indeed, we'll show them how superior we are. One last push, and their precious sniper will be nothing but a faint memory." Far below, within the depths of Earth's military command, Major Jason Hayes stood before a group of soldiers, each of them older than the last generation of warriors the galaxy had seen. He was a relic of a time long gone, his uniform adorned with the insignia of the old world, a time when snipers were revered as the kings of the battlefield. It was a mantle Hayes had worn with pride, even if the galaxy laughed at the notion. His fingers traced the worn stock of his rifle, an antique in comparison to the sleek, futuristic weapons the aliens wielded, but one that had served him well. The laughter of the alien soldiers reached his ears, but he chose not to acknowledge it. He had a job to do. Hayes knew the stakes. The galactic forces were closing in, and humanity's survival depended on their ability to hold the line. His team of snipers, the few who had survived the first wave of attacks, stood with him, their faces drawn with fatigue but unwavering determination. They may have been mocked, but they knew the value of a single shot. A sniper could take down the enemy's strongest without ever being seen. It was a tactic as old as warfare itself, but that didn't mean it wasn't deadly. "I know they don't believe in us," Hayes said quietly, his voice carrying a weight that demanded attention. "But we're still here. We're still fighting. And that means something The soldiers nodded, their eyes filled with the same resolve that had driven humanity to rise from the ashes of its past wars. Despite the galaxy's disdain, they had learned to adapt, to make do with what they had. Hayes had seen the look of superiority in the eyes of the aliens when they first encountered humanity on the battlefield. It was a look he had come to understand all too well. The belief that the humans, with their crude technology and outdated strategies, could never hope to win. The aliens had laughed at Earth's inability to adapt fast enough, at the outdated tactics that had once earned humanity its place on the battlefield. But Hayes had seen something else in the eyes of those mocking soldiers: doubt. The kind of doubt that came when a species had no real understanding of what they were up against. They had seen the human soldiers as nothing more than ants, scurrying about on a battlefield that was not meant for them. But that was their mistake. Humans had always been more than the sum of their parts. They had a drive that couldn't be quantified by technology or alien tactics. As the battle raged on, with the galactic soldiers sweeping through human defenses, Hayes took his position. There would be no second chances. The enemy would come, and they would be stopped by the precision of his shot. The mocking laughter of the galactic forces would soon give way to something else, a realization that humanity was not as fragile as they had believed. The first shot rang out, cutting through the silence of the battlefield. Somewhere far above, Clarinet's laughter faltered, the sound of it suddenly too hollow, too distant. Hayes hadn't just fired a shot. He had fired a warning, and he would fire again. The skies above Earth were alive with the screech of advanced alien ships, their sleek frames cutting through the atmosphere like razor blades. Below, humanity's forces were in full retreat. The Galactic Battalion's relentless assault had driven them to the brink. Cities that had once stood as symbols of human resilience now lay in ruins, and yet the fight was far from over. Among the debris, human soldiers clung to life, their resolve unshaken by the overwhelming force of their enemies. Major Jason Hayes adjusted the scope of his rifle, his eyes scanning the wreckage of what had been a small military outpost. The earth beneath him was soaked with the blood of his comrades, but he had no time for grief. The battle raged on. The sniper's role had always been to wait for the right moment, to strike with precision when the enemy least expected it. But this battle was different. The galactic soldiers had grown cautious, aware of the human sniper's uncanny ability to neutralize their leaders. They were no longer careless. Hayes squinted through the lens of his rifle. His mind wasn't on the physical world around him, but on the target he knew was coming. The alien forces were clever, more strategic than anything humanity had ever faced. Their tactics were based on technology that bent the laws of physics, creating an almost invincible line of defense. And yet, they underestimated one thing: humanity's ingenuity, the ability to turn even the most outdated technology into a weapon of war. His hand tightened around the trigger, but he held off, waiting for the right target. He was patient. The only thing that mattered now was his shot. The pressure to succeed, to live up to the stories of the American sniper, was a weight that sat heavy on his shoulders. He couldn't afford to miss. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Clarin and his officers were watching the human resistance with growing amusement. The alien commanders had seen countless species rise and fall throughout the galaxy, but the humans, despite their desperate efforts, had not yet realized their place. Their ancient weapons and tactics were outdated, and their best sniper was no different. They were an amusing distraction, nothing more. Clarin stood at the head of his command unit, his chrome-plated body glinting under the lights of his command ship. His multifaceted eyes scanned the battlefield, and his mind turned to strategy. Despite the humans' stubbornness, the inevitable victory was clear. Their technology was no match for the galactic arsenal. And yet, every time they thought they had eradicated the human forces, a sniper would appear from the shadows, taking down one of their commanders with pinpoint accuracy. It was becoming a pattern, but Clarin refused to acknowledge the human threat as anything more than a nuisance. Threx, his insectoid lieutenant, shifted beside him, her sharp, clicking mandibles betraying her unease. "The humans are more resilient than we anticipated," she said, her voice thick with disdain. They are not a threat, Claren replied confidently, though his tone lacked the usual certainty. We will crush them like we have done with every other species. One shot from one man cannot alter the course of this war. Threx hesitated. What of the sniper? His shots are becoming too accurate to ignore. Claren waved a dismissive hand. The sniper is simply a relic of their past, a throwback to an age of warfare that no longer has any place in the galaxy. Our weapons are far beyond anything they can dream of. This will end soon. Back at the human lines, Hayes was preparing for the impossible. The distance was great, the target a moving figure amongst the chaos. The aliens had become wise to his methods, and now every movement was calculated, every approach analyzed. They knew he was there, watching, waiting, but they didn't know where he was. That was the advantage. He shifted slightly, adjusting his aim as an alien officer emerged from a concealed bunker. The officer's glowing, metallic skin shimmered in the haze of the battle, unaware of the imminent danger. Hayes breathed in slowly, steadying his nerves. The shot had to be perfect. He had only one chance. Just as he was about to squeeze the trigger, the sound of movement to his left caught his attention. A human soldier, covered in dust and blood, crawled towards him, panic in his eyes. "Sir, we're losing ground. They're coming from all sides." Before the soldier could finish, the ground shook with the impact of an alien bomb exploding nearby. The soldier was thrown backwards, his body limp as he crashed into the debris. Hayes's heart raced, but his eyes never left the target. The alien officer was still moving, unaware of the chaos unfolding around him. For a split second, Hayes hesitated. The soldier's warning echoed in his ears. We're losing ground, but he couldn't afford to lose focus. The sniper's job was to end the threat quickly, not to engage with the chaos. With a final, steady breath, he took the shot. The bullet sliced through the air with lethal precision, striking the alien officer right in the chest. The alien crumpled to the ground instantly, his body hitting the dirt with a dull thud. For a moment, the battlefield fell silent. The alien soldiers, who had been advancing with overwhelming force, hesitated. The uncertainty was palpable. Claren, who had been observing the scene from his command ship, froze. The sniper's shot was not one of luck. It was deliberate, calculated. His officer, his commander, had just been killed by a single human shot, a shot that had pierced the heart of the most advanced army the galaxy had ever known. Threx turned to Claren, her voice filled with a rare trace of concern. This is no ordinary sniper." Claren's mind raced. The humans weren't simply surviving. They were adapting, learning. The idea that a single human, armed with nothing but an old sniper rifle, could stand against the might of their technology was becoming more and more impossible to ignore. Back on the ground, Hayes didn't feel victorious. The death of one officer wouldn't win the war. But it was a message, a signal to the enemy that they had underestimated humanity. There was more to the human spirit than brute force or advanced technology. The fight was far from over, but Hayes knew that the battle had just taken a turn. The aliens might have laughed at them before, but they weren't laughing now. The silence was shattered by the roar of another alien ship descending. The war was far from won, but for the first time in this long, brutal struggle, the galactic soldiers were beginning to understand that Earth wasn't a lost cause. The humans were not just surviving, they were beginning to fight back. And that made them dangerous. As Hayes adjusted his position, his eyes still locked on the horizon, he knew that the real battle had just begun. The alien forces had pushed humanity to the brink. Cities burned in the distance, their once towering structures now reduced to smoldering heaps of ash and steel. The remnants of Earth's military were scattered across the landscape, holding fast to every inch of territory they could. The sky above was a perpetual storm of alien ships, their engines humming with the promise of destruction. And yet, against all odds, humanity remained, fighting back with a ferocity that even the galactic soldiers could not easily dismiss. Hayes crouched low in the rubble, his rifle resting in his hands. His breath came in shallow bursts, his eyes narrowed in concentration. The battlefield had become a brutal game of cat and mouse. The alien forces were no longer underestimating him. They were hunting him. They had seen his shot from the previous engagement, and now they understood that he wasn't just some relic of the past. He was a threat. But Hayes was prepared. He had always been prepared. He learned long ago that victory wasn't always a matter of force. It was a matter of patience, precision, and timing. Every fiber of his being was attuned to the rhythm of the battle around him. The alien forces may have been stronger, faster, and better equipped, but they didn't have the one thing that humanity possessed: an unwavering will to survive. As he adjusted the focus of his scope, Hayes's mind flashed back to the first battle, the moment when the alien officers had laughed at the idea of a single human sniper changing the course of a war. They hadn't believed it then, but now, as the bodies of their comrades littered the battlefield, they were beginning to see just how wrong they had been. The leader of the alien forces, Claren, watched from his command ship as his troops advanced on the last human stronghold. The pressure of the situation was palpable. His officers, once so confident in their superiority, had begun to question their strategy. Hayes was no longer a joke. The sniper had become a symbol of humanity's defiance. Claren clenched his mandibles, a rare sign of frustration. "This must end now," he growled to his subordinates, his voice a deep hum of authority. "Send in the elite forces. I want this human dead, or we will lose this war." Threx, the insectoid lieutenant, hesitated before speaking. "Commander, the sniper's shots are too precise. We've lost several high-ranking officers to him already. Perhaps it's time to consider a different approach." Claren's gaze narrowed. He didn't like the suggestion, but he couldn't deny the reality of the situation. The sniper was disrupting their carefully laid plans, forcing them into a game they didn't know how to play. But Claren wasn't one to retreat. He had always believed that with enough power, anything could be destroyed, and the humans had no power left. "We will crush them, Threx. The sniper will not stop us. We will send everything we have." Back on the ground, Hayes heard the hum of alien engines in the distance. He could feel the vibrations of their ships as they descended upon the human position. This was it, the final assault. His hand tightened around the rifle stock. The weight of the moment settled over him like a thick fog. He had one shot, one chance to make it count. He adjusted his aim, scanning the horizon for the command unit. The aliens would be coming for him, but if he could take out their leader, if he could remove Claren from the equation, maybe, just maybe, humanity would have a fighting chance. He had trained for this moment. He had spent years honing his skills, understanding the nuances of the battlefield, learning how to read the smallest movements in the chaos. But this wasn't just about skill anymore. This was about survival. Earth's survival. The survival of every man, woman, and child who had fought tooth and nail to protect their home. If he failed, the galaxy would never remember them. If he succeeded, well, that was a risk he had to take. The alien troops were drawing closer. Hayes could see their forms, dark silhouettes against the dust-filled air. Their weapons glowed with lethal energy, their movements precise and calculated. They were coming, and so was Claren. Through the scope, Hayes's world narrowed down to a single point. There, at the heart of the advancing forces, was Claren. The commander stood tall, his chrome body gleaming in the dim light, a beacon for his soldiers. Hayes's finger hovered over the trigger. In that moment, time seemed to slow. The sounds of battle faded into the background. The world outside the lens of his scope disappeared. All that existed was the target, the leader, the key to ending it all. Hayes took a breath, steadying himself. The aliens had underestimated humanity. They had mocked the idea of a human sniper changing the outcome of this war, but they had failed to understand the human spirit. The drive to survive, the instinct to protect what was ours, could never be measured by advanced technology or superior firepower. It was something more. He exhaled slowly, his finger gently pulling the trigger. The shot rang out, a single crack that split the air. The sound was almost swallowed by the chaos of the battlefield. But to Hayes, it was everything. The bullet flew true, cutting through the air with the precision he had spent a lifetime perfecting. The shot found its mark. Claren's body jerked back as the bullet struck him in the chest. His multiple eyes widened in disbelief as his armor cracked under the force of the impact. For a moment, he stood frozen, as though time itself had come to a halt. Then, as his body crumpled to the ground, his command ship fell silent. The alien forces froze, a palpable shift in the atmosphere as the realization hit them like a tidal wave. Their leader was dead, and the humans were not finished. Hayes lowered his rifle, his body heavy with the weight of what he had just done. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, he allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. He had delivered the blow, but the war was not won with a single shot. The humans had proven their worth, though. The galaxy would not forget this day. As the alien forces began to retreat, Hayes remained on the battlefield, watching as the tide turned in humanity's favor. The war was far from over, but the message had been sent. Earth would not be written off as an insignificant relic of a forgotten age. Humanity had a future, one that no alien force could easily take away. In the distance, the last of the alien ships lifted off, their engines sputtering as they pulled back. Hayes felt the weight of his responsibility settle back onto his shoulders. The sniper's job was never done. But for now, Earth had won. And as the sun began to set on the ravaged battlefield, Hayes allowed himself a rare smile, knowing that for once, the galaxy would have to remember humanity.